My name is Sylvia. I'm sitting in the back of a police car outside the dental office, wrapped in a thin gray blanket that does nothing to stop my shaking. Through the window, I watch two officers escort a man out of the building in handcuffs. His head is down, his wrists pinned behind his back, but I know exactly who he is. 3 hours ago, he kissed me goodbye in this very parking lot and told me he'd be waiting for me. 3 hours ago, I thought he was my boyfriend, the kind, patient man I'd been dating for 3 months. I thought I was so lucky to have found someone like him. Now, as I watch him being shoved into the back of the squad car, a detective explains to me that his real name isn't Ethan Reed, that he's wanted in 2 states, and that I was never supposed to leave this dental office alive. The only reason I'm here to tell this story is that my dentist noticed something I completely missed and found a way to warn me without saying a word. Let me take you back to before that fateful morning so you can understand just how blind I was. I work as a graphic designer at an advertising agency in Seattle. It's a creative job that I enjoy, and my colleagues are great. I live alone in a cozy studio apartment in the city center, close to all the cafes and art galleries I love. My daily routine is pretty simple. I go to work from 9 to 5, take evening walks in the park when the weather is nice, meet up with friends on weekends, and have a weekly video call with my parents. My parents, Robert and Linda, are both retired teachers. They live in a small town about an hour away from Seattle. They've always been very supportive of me, but they're also quite protective. Every time we talk, they remind me to be careful, to lock my doors, and to trust my instincts. I used to roll my eyes and tell them they worried too much, but now I wish I'd listened more closely. My older brother, Jake, is 32 and lives in San Francisco with his wife and 2 kids. We're not as close as we used to be, but we still keep in touch. He's always been the adventurous one, and he's encouraged me to take risks and follow my dreams. 3 months ago, I met Ethan at a coffee shop. I was sitting at a table, working on a design project, when he walked up and asked if he could share the table. We started chatting, and I was immediately drawn to his warm smile and charming personality. He told me he was a software engineer who traveled a lot for work, which explained why he was only available to see me a few times a week. Ethan seemed like the perfect guy. He was attentive, kind, and always made me feel special. He remembered little details about me, like my favorite coffee order and the books I liked to read. He asked about my family, my job, and my hopes for the future. After a string of bad dates and disappointing relationships, I thought I'd finally found the one. The day of my dental appointment started like any other. I woke up, got dressed, and checked my phone to find a text from Ethan. Still picking you up at 9:30 for your appointment. Can't wait to take you to lunch after. My car was in the shop getting serviced, so Ethan offered to drive me. I thought it was such a sweet gesture. He picked me up right on time, driving a sleek black sedan. We chatted easily on the way to the dental office, talking about a movie we wanted to see and a new restaurant we wanted to try. Everything felt normal, safe. The dental office was in a small medical building a few blocks from my apartment. I'd been going to the same dentist, Dr. Laura Thompson, for years. She's a kind and gentle woman who always makes me feel at ease. Her hygienist, Emily, is also very friendly and remembers details about my life. Ethan parked the car and walked me inside. The waiting room was small and quiet, with a few chairs and a TV playing the news on mute. He sat down in a chair near the window and pulled out his phone. "I'll be right here when you're done," he said, smiling up at me. "Take your time." I smiled back, feeling grateful to have someone so thoughtful in my life. Then I followed Emily through the door and down the hallway to the examination room. I had no idea that in less than half an hour, my world would come crashing down. The appointment started just like it always did. Emily led me to the examination chair and draped a paper bib across my chest. She asked about my work and how I was doing, and I told her about a new project I was working on. We made small talk as she began cleaning my teeth. About 15 minutes in, Dr. Thompson came in. She was wearing her usual white coat, her hair neatly pulled back. She smiled at me and asked how I was feeling, then put on a pair of gloves and started her examination. "Let's see how everything's looking," she said, leaning over me with a small mirror and probe. I opened my mouth and let her work, my eyes wandering around the room. I noticed a new poster on the wall, a colorful illustration of a healthy smile. Suddenly, Dr. Thompson paused. She wasn't looking at my mouth anymore. Her eyes had shifted to something behind me, towards the small window in the door that looked out into the hallway. I couldn't see what she was looking at, but I noticed the change in her expression. Her eyes tightened slightly, and there was a tension in her jaw that hadn't been there before. She resumed the examination after a moment, but her movements were slower, more deliberate. "Everything looks good so far," she said, her voice calm and professional. "Emily, can you hand me the periodontal probe?" Emily passed her the instrument, and I saw her glance towards the door, too, just for a second. Then she looked away, her face carefully blank. A few minutes later, Dr. Thompson set down her tools and stepped back from the chair. She picked up a small notepad from the counter and scribbled something quickly. Then she turned and held it up so only I could see. 6 words written in blue ink: "If you need help, don't speak." My heart stopped. I read the words twice, then a third time, trying to make sense of them. This had to be some kind of mistake, a strange joke. But when I looked up at Dr. Thompson's face, there was no trace of humor. Her eyes were locked on mine, calm but urgent, waiting for my response. I didn't know what to do. I didn't understand why she was asking me this. My mind raced through possibilities, none of them making sense. Was there something wrong with me medically? Had she found something during the exam? Why couldn't I speak? Then she glanced towards the door again, just for a fraction of a second, and I understood. This wasn't about me. This was about someone else. Someone out there. My stomach dropped. I nodded. Dr. Thompson wrote something else on the notepad and showed it to me. "The man who brought you. Do you know him?" I hesitated. 3 months felt like a long time when you're in the middle of it, but sitting there in that chair, I suddenly realized how little I actually knew about Ethan. I knew what he'd told me about himself, but did I really know him? I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't know him well." "Not really?" Dr. Thompson leaned closer to me, pretending to examine my back teeth. Her face was inches from mine, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet I could barely hear her. "There's a dangerous man in my waiting room. I saw his face on the news last week. Stay calm. I've already called the police. We're going to keep you safe." The room seemed to tilt around me. I gripped the armrests of the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get out of this building. But I couldn't move. The man I'd been dating, the man I'd trusted, was sitting just a few feet away, waiting to take me to lunch. And he was between me and the only exit. My entire body went cold. I wanted to sit up, to run, to scream and demand answers. But Dr. Thompson's hand was on my shoulder, gentle but firm, keeping me in place. Her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "Stay still, stay quiet, trust us." She straightened up and spoke in a normal voice, loud enough to carry through the thin walls if anyone was listening. "Everything looks great, Sylvia. Emily is going to take a few x-rays just to make sure we're not missing anything, and then we'll get you scheduled for your next cleaning." Her tone was so casual, so routine that for a moment, I almost believed nothing was wrong. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes kept flickering towards the door. She was acting, putting on a performance to buy time. Emily moved to my side, her face calm and professional, even though I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the X-ray equipment. She guided me out of the main chair and towards the machine in the corner of the room, positioning the heavy lead apron over my chest. As she leaned close to adjust the sensor in my mouth, she whispered directly into my ear. "The police are on their way. We need to keep you back here until they arrive. Just breathe. We're not going to let anything happen to you." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My throat felt like it was closing up, and tears were burning at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back and focused on breathing in and out. In and out. Don't panic. Don't fall apart. Dr. Thompson excused herself, saying she needed to check on paperwork for another patient. I watched her leave the room, her footsteps calm and unhurried, like this was just another ordinary day. I later learned what she actually did. She walked to the front desk and spoke quietly with the receptionist, a young woman named Lily. She told Lily to lock the main entrance quietly to make sure no one could leave without going through the back. Then she walked into the waiting room and sat down across from Ethan. They made small talk. Dr. Thompson asked Ethan how his day was going, mentioned the weather, and complained about traffic. She asked if he lived nearby, what he did for work, and how long he and I had been together. Ethan answered every question smoothly, charmingly, just like he always did. He had no idea that Dr. Thompson was stalling, buying time while the police raced towards the building. Back in the examination room, I sat frozen in the X-ray chair, staring at the ceiling without really seeing it. Emily stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. She talked about her weekend plans, about a new recipe she wanted to try, but her voice sounded distant, like it was coming from far away. My mind kept going back to Ethan. I thought about the 3 months we'd spent together, all the dinners, the movies, the long walks in the park. He'd seemed so perfect, so kind and caring. But now I realized that I didn't really know him at all. What had he been planning? What would have happened if Dr. Thompson hadn't recognized his face? I thought about my parents, sitting in their cozy living room, probably watching TV. They had no idea what was happening to me right now, that my life was hanging by a thread. Every second felt like an eternity. I kept waiting to hear footsteps in the hallway, to hear Ethan's voice asking where I was, to hear the door handle turn. My heart was beating so fast I could feel it pulsing in my temples. Then, from somewhere outside, I heard the sound that changed everything. Sirens, faint at first, then growing louder, getting closer. Emily squeezed my hand, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself breathe. The siren stopped right outside the building. I heard car doors slamming, heavy footsteps on the pavement, and muffled voices giving commands. Emily kept her hand on my arm, holding me steady in the X-ray chair. Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. We just listened, straining to hear what was happening in the waiting room down the hall. The front door opened. I heard Dr. Thompson's voice, calm and measured, greeting someone, then other voices, deeper and more authoritative. Police officers. They were inside. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then Ethan spoke, and hearing his voice sent a wave of nausea through my entire body. "I'm sorry. Is there a problem? I'm just waiting for my girlfriend. She's getting her teeth cleaned." His tone was friendly, confused, perfectly innocent. The same voice that had told me he loved me, that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. I wanted to cover my ears and block it out. One of the officers responded, his voice steady but firm. I couldn't make out the exact words, but I heard Ethan's tone shift. The friendliness faded, and he started asking questions, demanding to know what was going on, insisting there had been some kind of mistake. Then the shouting started. "Get your hands off me. This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong." There was a scuffle, the sound of furniture scraping across the floor, and more voices, louder now, overlapping. Commands being barked. A crash that sounded like a chair tipping over. Emily pulled me closer, positioning herself between me and the door, as if her body could shield me from whatever was happening out there. I gripped the armrests of the X-ray chair so hard my fingers ached. Every instinct told me to run, to hide, to make myself as small as possible. But there was nowhere to go. Then silence. Heavy, suffocating silence that seemed to stretch on forever. A knock on the examination room door made both of us jump. A woman's voice, calm and professional, called through the wood. "This is Officer Davis with the Seattle Police Department. It's safe to come out now." Emily let out a shaky breath and squeezed my shoulder. She walked to the door and opened it slowly, revealing a female officer in uniform standing in the hallway. The officer looked past Emily to where I was still sitting in the chair, frozen in place. "Sylvia, you can come out. He's in custody." I stood up on legs that felt like they might collapse beneath me. Emily took my arm and guided me towards the door. Every step felt like walking through water, slow and heavy and unreal. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be my life. We walked down the short hallway towards the waiting room. I don't know what I expected to see, but nothing could have prepared me for the image that greeted me when I turned the corner. Ethan was on the floor, face down, his hands cuffed behind his back. 2 officers stood over him, and a third was speaking into a radio clipped to his shoulder. The chairs in the waiting room had been knocked askew. A magazine rack was tipped over, its contents scattered across the carpet. Dr. Thompson was standing near the reception desk, her face pale but composed. Lily, the receptionist, was beside her, her eyes wide and her hands pressed over her mouth. Ethan lifted his head as I entered the room. Our eyes met, and I felt something cold and sharp twist in my chest. The warmth I thought I had seen in him was gone. The charming smile, the gentle patience, the kindness that had made me feel so special, all of it had vanished. What looked back at me was flat, empty, and filled with something I can only describe as rage. "Sylvia," his voice was eerily calm, almost conversational. "Tell them this is a mistake. Tell them we're together." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I just stared at him. This stranger wearing the face of a man I thought I knew. One of the officers stepped forward and explained what they had found. His real name wasn't Ethan Reed. It was Ryan Black. He was wanted in 2 states for assault, stalking, and false imprisonment. There had been 2 other women before me. One had escaped after 3 days. The other had been held for almost 2 weeks. Dr. Thompson had recognized his face from a news segment that aired the previous week, a warning about a dangerous man still at large. When Ethan walked into the waiting room that morning, Dr. Thompson knew exactly who she was sitting across from. She excused herself, confirmed her suspicion online, and called 911 while pretending to review patient records. She saved my life by staying calm, by not confronting Ryan directly, by finding a way to warn me without putting anyone else in danger. Ryan Black was arrested that morning and charged with stalking, attempted kidnapping, and multiple counts of assault and false imprisonment from his previous victims. The police told me he had been planning what he called a getaway for us, a cabin he had rented in the mountains, where no one would hear me scream. They found zip ties in his car, duct tape in the trunk, and a bag packed with supplies that made my stomach turn when they described it. He had been patient with me for 3 months because he was waiting for the perfect moment. That Thursday morning, with my car in the shop and no one expecting me anywhere until lunch, was supposed to be it. His trial took place 8 months later in a courtroom downtown. I testified on the 3rd day, sitting in a wooden chair 15 feet away from the man who had held my hand and told me I was the most important person in his life. My voice shook at first, but I forced myself to keep going. I told the jury about the coffee shop where we met, the dates we went on, the texts he sent that made me feel loved. I told them about the note Dr. Thompson showed me, and the terror I felt when I realized the truth. I didn't look at Ryan while I spoke. I couldn't. But I felt his eyes on me the entire time. He was convicted on all charges and sentenced to 23 years in prison. The judge called him a predator who used charm as a weapon. She said it was only through the vigilance of a careful observer that another woman was spared. The two women Ryan had victimized before me both reached out after the verdict. We met at a small diner in the suburbs on a rainy Sunday afternoon. I didn't know what to expect. Part of me was afraid that seeing them would make everything feel more real, more permanent, more impossible to move past. But when I sat down across from them, something shifted inside me. They understood in a way no one else could. They had looked into the same eyes, heard the same lies, trusted the same performance. One of them, A.